It's easy to think of Europe as a fantastic vacation spot, a place filled with historic landmarks, questionable fashion choices, and an impressive variety of breads. But behind all that, Europe is an absolute giant in the world economy. It's not just a tourist destination, it's a massive workshop, a bustling marketplace, and a critical financial hub all rolled into one. When Europe's economy is doing well, it buys a tremendous amount of stuff from other countries, from American-made software to cars assembled in Asia. This keeps factories humming and people employed far beyond its own borders, creating a stable flow of commerce that benefits everyone. Think of the global economy as a complex web of connections, and Europe is one of the biggest, thickest strands holding it all together. It's the largest export market for the United States, buying around 500 billion euros worth of goods and services. This relationship isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It represents real jobs, from a factory worker in Ohio to a tech developer in California. When European businesses and consumers have money to spend, that spending power ripples outwards, supporting industries and livelihoods across the entire planet. A healthy European economy means a more stable world economy, plain and simple. The continent's influence isn't limited to just buying things. European companies are global players. Think about the cars you see on the road, the medicines in your cabinet, or the machinery used in factories worldwide. Many of these originate from European corporations with supply chains that stretch across continents. A German car company, for instance, might use parts from Mexico, software from India, and raw materials from Africa. This intricate network means that Europe's economic health is directly tied to the prosperity of its countless international partners, making it a cornerstone of global trade and production. Furthermore, Europe's banks and financial institutions are deeply woven into the global financial system. They lend money to businesses in South America, invest in projects in Southeast Asia, and hold assets from all over the world. This interconnectedness means that what happens in Frankfurt or Paris doesn't stay in Frankfurt or Paris. The financial stability of the entire bloc acts as a bedrock for international markets. If that foundation starts to crack, the tremors can be felt thousands of miles away, shaking investor confidence and threatening the stability of banks that have nothing on the surface to do with Europe. So, what could possibly knock this economic giant off its feet? Right now, the biggest threat has a simple and frankly quite boring name: tariffs. Specifically, we're talking about new United States tariffs on European goods. A tariff is basically a tax on things brought in from other countries, making them more expensive. Imagine your favorite imported chocolate bar suddenly costing 30% more. You'd probably buy less of it, right? Now, apply that same logic to everything from cars and machinery to pharmaceuticals. That is precisely what is happening, and it's creating a massive headache for Europe's economy. This isn't just a minor disagreement over trade rules, it's a full-blown escalation. The United States has threatened, and in some cases already imposed, steep tariffs on billions of euros worth of European products. We're talking about tariffs as high as 25% on cars and a staggering 50% on metals. For an economy that relies heavily on selling its high-quality goods to the world, this is like a star quarterback suddenly being told he has to play with his hands tied behind his back. The new costs make European products less competitive in their biggest market, forcing them to either absorb the cost, which hurts their profits, or pass it on to consumers, which hurts their sales. The immediate effect of these trade barriers is a sharp drop in demand for European exports. Factories that were once busy making cars, chemicals, and luxury goods for American consumers suddenly find their orders cancelled or significantly reduced. This slowdown doesn't just happen overnight. It builds like a storm gathering on the horizon. First, a few orders are lost. Then, a production line is paused. Before you know it, entire factories are facing the prospect of scaling back operations, which directly threatens the jobs of thousands of workers. This is the front line of a trade war: empty order books and worried employees. The problem is compounded by the sheer uncertainty of it all. Businesses thrive on predictability. They need to know the rules of the game to make long-term plans, like building a new factory or hiring more staff. But when the threat of new, even higher tariffs looms constantly, that predictability vanishes. Companies become hesitant to invest, consumers get nervous and save their money instead of spending it, and the entire economic engine begins to sputter. This fear and hesitation can be just as damaging as the tariffs themselves, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where the fear of a recession helps to cause one. A recession in Europe doesn't stay neatly contained within its borders. Because the global economy is so interconnected, problems in one major region can spread like a virus, and the symptoms can appear in the most unexpected places. The first and most obvious way this happens is through trade. When European businesses and consumers stop buying, it's not just European companies that suffer. A factory in China that makes components for German cars sees its orders dry up. A farmer in Brazil who sells coffee beans to Italian cafes finds his market shrinking. Suddenly, job losses aren't just a European problem, they start popping up all over the globe. This financial contagion gets even scarier when you look at the banks. European banks are massive global institutions with loans and investments spread across the world. If a recession hits Europe, some of those European companies and individuals will struggle to pay back their loans. This creates losses for the banks, making them weaker and more cautious. In response, they might start pulling back on their lending not just in Europe, but everywhere. A business in the United States trying to get a loan for expansion might suddenly be denied, not because it's a bad company, but because its bank is getting nervous about its own stability due to problems happening an ocean away. Then there's the issue of investor confidence, which is a fragile thing at the best of times. When a major economy like Europe stumbles, investors everywhere get spooked. They start selling off stocks, bonds, and other assets they perceive as risky, seeking the safety of cash or government bonds. This widespread panic selling can cause stock markets to plummet from Tokyo to New York. It creates a vicious cycle. Falling markets make people feel poorer, so they spend less, which hurts company profits, which causes markets to fall even further. It's a domino effect driven by pure, unadulterated fear. Ultimately, this global slowdown affects everyone, even if you don't own stocks or work in an export industry. As global demand falls, the price of many raw materials, like oil and copper, can drop. While cheaper gas might sound nice, it's a sign of a sick global economy. It can also lead to deflation, a period of falling prices, which sounds good but is actually terrible. Deflation encourages people to delay purchases because they expect things to get even cheaper, which grinds economic activity to a halt. This is how a European problem becomes a global crisis, impacting prices, jobs, and financial stability for millions. Faced with a brewing economic storm, you would hope that governments and central banks have a brilliant plan to save the day. And they do have tools, but those tools have their limits. The first line of defense is usually the central bank, like the European Central Bank or the United States Federal Reserve. Their go-to move is to cut interest rates. Lower rates make it cheaper for businesses to borrow money for new projects and for consumers to take out loans for cars and homes. The idea is to encourage spending and investment to get the economy moving again. The problem is, they can only cut rates so much, and if rates are already low, this tool becomes far less powerful. Governments can also step in with what's called fiscal policy, which is a fancy way of saying they can spend money or cut taxes. A government might launch big infrastructure projects like building new roads and bridges to create jobs and stimulate demand. Or they could give citizens a tax cut, putting more money directly into their pockets in the hope that they'll go out and spend it. However, many European governments are already carrying a lot of debt from past crises, like the pandemic and the 2022 energy shock. This limits their ability to borrow and spend their way out of another recession without spooking investors about their long-term financial health. The biggest challenge, however, is that these traditional tools are designed to fight a typical recession, not one caused by a trade war. Cutting interest rates doesn't magically make a 30% tariff disappear. Government spending can cushion the blow, but it can't fully replace the massive amount of foreign demand that has vanished. It's like trying to use a fire hose to stop a tornado. You might be able to put out some of the smaller fires it causes, but you can't stop the destructive force at its center. The root of the problem is political and requires a political solution, like negotiating an end to the tariffs. This is why the world should be paying close attention. A European recession morphing into a global crisis serves as a stark reminder that economic cooperation is not just a nice idea, it's a necessity for global stability. It shows how quickly trade disputes driven by politics can inflict real-world economic pain on millions of people who have nothing to do with the initial disagreement. The key lesson here is that in our deeply interconnected world, building economic walls and starting trade fights is a bit like setting a fire in your neighbor's house while forgetting that your own house is made of wood and located right next door. Eventually, everyone gets burned.